and welcome to the BlockLeaders Podcast with me, Jillian Godsil. Today, we have a great treat for you. We have an artist who is internationally renowned, a very, very famous artist, Irish artist, who's also gone on the rabbit hole and is looking at performance and generative art with some really fascinating results. So, John Gerrard, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
The pleasure. Thank you.
As a fellow Irish person, it's always nice to meet people. And also, we were discussing earlier, you live on the same road that I used to live on in Dublin once upon a time. It's a very small little world. But tell me your background. For people who are not familiar with you, you have a very, very impressive resume. I don't know where you want to start, at the beginning, in the middle, or tell me just about your art.
I think it's always good to start at the start in a way. So I think quite pertinently to Crystalline Work, which we will speak about. Mm-hmm. I was born in Tipperary in the countryside. Grew up in the countryside, not on, let's say, on a small holding, not like a mid farmland, but not in a farming family. But my sister actually farms down in Tipperary now. She has a wonderful farm called Brookfield Farm down in Tip. But grew up in Tipperary. At 20, I was an undergrad in a place called the Ruskin School, which is a part of Oxford University. Got really into computing, really through access in Oxford through computer science labs, like an art student with access to, let's say, university facilities. And then became very committed to, I suppose, on the one hand, computing, on the other hand, 3D scanning, strangely enough, in the mid-90s. And then into the 2000s, into the game engine. So, between those three subjects of scanning, computing, and the game engine, that like really informed what I do. I, have worked as an artist, made my first, let's say, I would say my first mature work in 2005, a piece called 1,000 Year Dawn. So been working nearly 20 years. As you have mentioned, I've exhibited widely, from Collateral Event, Venice Biennale, Sydney Biennale, Guangzhou Biennale, a lot of these kind of art biennales that are quite specialized in a sense, but also works in the collection of the Tate, in the collection of the MoMA, collection of SF MoMA, museums globally, and represented by a wonderful gallery called Pace Gallery globally now.
Wow. Do you want to describe for watchers what your art? I mean, before we get to the crystalline, can you is there a term?
Well, or? I mean, I would say I typically call my work simulations, and they are 365-day solar sims, and the subject matter changes, but let's say the what is portrayed changes within these virtual worlds that I build, these pieces of art software. But the subject matter often pivots around these subjects of power, subjects of, where power intersects with energy, where power intersects with, different forms of power in a way. But the best known of the works is probably Western Flag. If your listeners or viewers Google Western Flag, you'll find a black smoke flag for the Carbon Age, which was commissioned by Channel 4 in the UK in 2017, and actually became very well known really through Tumblr and these kind of environments in the late 2000, let's say 17, 18, 19, 20. It's a well-known work of mine. Again, it relates to carbon dioxide, nationhood, power, energy, these kinds of things.
Can you describe your method of work?
So if you're seeking to make games, virtual games, as an artist, you are well advised to build a team, basically. It is a very time-consuming process. So I would have typically a team of modelers, 3D modelers, wonderful producer, a guy called Bernard Putzelberger, normally some programmers who would work on these pieces, animators, so it's a little bit like a game production team. They'd come on board for a project, and I would, in a sense, come up with the concept and art direct. And at the end of it, we would produce a piece of software, an XE, which is rendered locally to become the artwork, and Pace would place in the world, in collections in editions of 4. Now, what has really changed that, to link to the idea of the token, is the advent of what's called WebGL, Web Graphics Language, where you can render virtual worlds in the browser. And that is a big shift for me, because historically I would put the works on the landscape. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to show you a picture. Maybe this is better.
Good.
So I'll just do it through my website so people also have access to it. So if you go to johngerrard.net, I'm going to share my screen here. Let me do this, share this. So you can see that now, yeah?
Yes, totally.
So this is johngerrard.net, where I have a sort of a catalog raisonné of my work. And if you go to works here, and if you travel down to Western Flag, that's the piece that I described as probably the best known of the works. As I said, 1 second, I'm trying to just turn up the brightness here for myself. And that was originally commissioned by Channel 4, and they installed it actually very beautifully at Somerset House as a frameless LED. So you've got a light emitting diode wall in the world. And so the work is often installed on the street in this way. It's really, my great commitment, I would say, is to public art. That is the same work in Desert X in California, in the desert near Palm Springs. But what really changed that to jump across was the discovery of what's called WebGL. And the piece we're kind of principally talking about today is called Crystalline Work. And it is a WebGL work on the FearlFile app. So I'll come back to you, and I'll kind of line that up, and then we'll start talking about that.
Okay. So just before we jump into that, because it is, I'm looking online and it's amazing. All the different results are crazy. But I want to go backwards a bit. So I didn't realize, so you have such a strong computer background. Presumably you discovered about Bitcoin and blockchain and NFTs very early on.
I would say not really. Curiously, I made a piece about the mining of Bitcoin in 2018. Actually, I'll show it to you. I think it's interesting for your viewers.
And have you moved on with the energy consumption debate there?
Yeah, we'll get to that. Let me just do this. So basically, 1 second. So I'm just going to share this. So here we have again my works, and there's a piece here called Stream Sichuan from 2018. And what it is it's a portrait of a Bitcoin mine in China, in Sichuan, in 2018, which is powered by hydropower, by water, because there's just a lot of hydropower energy in this particular region. And I was very interested in this kind of like flow of water becoming this like flow of value through Bitcoin. Now, obviously, that's a bit of an outlier because Bitcoin is an energy monster. So really, my entry point to working with tokenized artworks, I don't really use the term NFTs that extensively. I would talk about digital art, full stop, and then I would talk about tokenized artworks. It's a slightly different language. My entry point to tokenized works was really at the point that the shift from proof of work to proof of stake, that allowed me to sort of enter the zone, mostly because of the ecological concerns about Ethereum. But rewinding a little bit, I did do a project in 2019 with Casey Reese, who's an incredible artist, where we tokenized works on it's called a Bitmark chain. So I did my first tokenized artwork in 19. My first major tokenized work was called Western Flag NFT in 2021, which is now in the collection of the Los Angeles County Museum of Art.
I was only going to insert that you're less an outlier than an anticipator, because Bitcoin has now become part of the ESG argument, ironically enough. And particularly, I was doing some interviews recently. In the UK, all the giant windmills in Scotland have problems. The grid can't accept all the energy inputs. And so it ends up that they're stranded. They're losing 200 million's worth of energy every year, which costs every household in the UK £40. And there's several companies that are taking those wasted energy and putting it into value, into Bitcoin. So it's actually ironically become part of the ESG argument. Anyway, we're
Right.
looking at this now. So tell me about this. This is the
Okay.
robot. I mean, my
So
God.
basically, first of all, this is an example of a virtual world which is rendered in the browser. So this is Crystalline Work, which you can see, which is performing, let's say, the work is being performed on FearlFile now. FearlFile.com is the platform that presents this artwork. If I click on the top left-hand corner, I can go full screen here. Can you see that full screen?
Yes,
No.
perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if I click and drag here in the scene, I can look around this performance. So this is a virtual world. I make a very strong distinction between, let's say, a data world, which this is, and a media world built up of, let's say, video or recordings. This is not recorded. This is a piece of software that's performed live in the browser. You're seeing a live performance, that's algorithmic performance. So the robot is equipped with an ice generation algorithm, basically, which fundamentally begins with the snowflake. The snowflake is the sort of inspiration of the whole piece. That snowflake is, in a sense, kind of, we have like opened the parameters of the snowflake and sort of worked with it as a generative art language, in a sense. So the robot, which we call a prismatic robot, the color of the robot shifts from solstice to solstice, summer solstice, all the way through the year across the prism. The robot 24 times a day performs new works. So here you can see the performances which are going on for the year. FearlFile will host the work for the year. You can collect 1 or 24 or however many you wish. They're $100 each. And I'm going to talk about some of the way in which that purchase price operates in a moment. So if you purchase one, no, not if you purchase one. Sorry, if you go to see the gallery, you can see the works that have been performed, basically. So this is the works that have been performed in June since the summer solstice. These are single ray works,
aren't they?
Yeah, they're like trees. The single ray works are a little bit like trees. So if I come to the bottom here, you will move out of the works that have been performed and into the artist proofs. The artist proofs ran, the robot performed artist proofs from June 8th for 12 days. And the artist proofs are basically one work per month across the year. So you can actually see, what the works are. So as you can see, it's been busy doing 24 works a day from the 20th of June, all of which to date have sold. So these are all in collections, all these works. But if we go down right to the bottom, here we're into the APs, the artist proofs, which we call year 0. And I'll go right to the middle of the artist proofs and you'll see like a winter. I'm going to demo for you a winter piece, basically. So so we're getting a little bit more wintry here. As you can see, the light is changing because it's getting darker in the Antarctic. And let me just click on one of these. I'll click on, let's say, this one. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is a 7-ray work because each time of the year has a different number of rays within the piece. So that'll load up. It belongs to somebody. I'm not quite sure who. Click top left-hand corner, and you can witness this work. So now the last thing I want to say about Crystalline Work is that if you acquire one of these pieces, these art pieces, which are tokenized, 24 are performed a day. There's 8,760 performed across the year. If you acquire one, 25% goes to this beautiful organization in Ireland called Home Tree. And Home Tree are let me just go in here. Home Tree are an amazing entity that are renovating a temperate rainforest in Connemara. They're renovating restoring a lost rainforest, a temperate rainforest in Ireland. So every day of the project that is supported will plant around about 33 trees. So at the moment it is barren, as you can see here, but historically this landscape would have been a temperate rainforest before it was in different ways denuded, and then you've got kind of species like sheep and goats that are continuing to keep it barren. So they've got this beautiful project to restore this setting, basically. So yeah, so I suppose the core logic is if you support a project where virtual ice is being produced, you may produce some real ice on the poles, where actually, sorry, Crystalline Work is sited on the Arctic. You may produce some real ice on the poles because trees are incredible climate coolers, basically.
And why did you choose the Arctic? That was because you were based on the snowflake?
We chose the Arctic mostly because of the geoengineering projects that are being proposed on the Arctic, basically. So you've got kind of extraordinarily, let's say, wild, ambitious geoengineering projects on the Arctic, from pumping ice from under the sea to the surface of the ice, thicken it, to covering the surface of the Arctic with tiny microscopic glass beads to reflect light back into space. We are entering a climate crisis, and scientists are starting to propose like very wild geoengineering, like technological geoengineering systems to address it. And so this work comes at this issue of global heating through kind of activist cultural lens, that one supports an artwork, and the artwork supports this action of planting trees.
I love it. And I must say the Home Tree project does look amazing, because we all know it here in Ireland that we're the most treed country, almost certainly in Europe, and now we're down to 1% of our land is covered in trees. It's shocking. And
well, a lot of it is also industrial.
monoculture.
A lot of industrial plantations of
monoculture trees, which is horrendous.
Yeah.
So this project, right? Because I now understand it much better, because I was going to say, how did you build a robot? But the robot is in the virtual world. That makes so much more sense, because I sort of had this vision of this robot sitting up in the Arctic by itself. So the work will run for a year.
Yes.
And there's 8,760. Is that right?
It'll perform 8,760 artworks. Yeah.
And then it stops.
And then, in a sense, the performance could continue. The work itself, like the performance, is an artwork in itself. The production of works, dropping into the gallery, is something else. It's basically, the work is flow. It's like data as flow in a way. And then, the art piece is flow and performance and prismatics. I call it prismatics, these languages, prism, which is, light and information and these things. But the tokenized pieces are singular. It's one pattern, one moment. There's a generative audio element, which is like one moment of the year. So I think of WebGL as a very important cultural vessel, in which you can place rich cultural works, but they are marooned without the browser. They're local. I think the browser really, for me, is a key interface for public art now. That's what I strongly believe, number one. Number two, the tokenization of these very, very rich cultural vessels, these WebGL cultural vessels, I call them infinite play albums, in a sense, like as opposed to the LP, which was physical. These things are IP, like infinite play things. They are not possible without tokenization, because tokenization has valued the digital. And as a result, I'm an unusual artist. I have been able to thrive as an artist making software for decades, but it was a very, it was a negotiation, with contemporary fine art, which I love and celebrate. And I don't talk about traditional art and digital art. I don't do that. I talk about art in all its richness. But I've negotiated, space to work as an artist in software within contemporary art for 2 decades. And now, actually, I see artists rising, artists like Kim Asendorf and, incredible artists you've never heard of, but you will in the future, who are empowered by tokenization. They can go to their studio, they can sit down, and they can get to work as artists. So it is a really exciting time for art, software, and especially public art.
Mm.
So I've, in the last 2 days, talked to 2 major museums, one in LA and one in Dublin. And I've said to them both, people, you have got to stop considering your front page browser as like a pinboard in like the office. It is a key cultural space. Commission artists to put works in the browser on your front page as if it is a gallery, like a really important gallery. And then there's a little menu where you click and you go in and you find out what's on or what, all that stuff. You know what I mean? Actually, what's amazing about your browser is that anybody on earth can access it. I think that's incredible. Otherwise, like, nobody can get to Dublin, nobody can get into the museum, really in numbers terms,
Democratization of art. Not everyone's
I know it's on these like super machines, these kind of things. I know it's a new cultural space for many people. It also breaks the tyranny of social media, the stream, which is kind of tyrannical, actually. Like, I'm very interested in rich cultural spaces which move people in different ways than the entrapment of the stream.
Interesting. Wow. So tell me finally, when did the first art piece drop? When was that?
So the piece, the performance began on the summer solstice, June 20th, 2024. But we actually, it's for me, I'm sort of, the APs began 12 days earlier, but really for the public, the works that are available start on June 20th, and it will finish on the summer solstice 2025, June 20th. And so, the works can be acquired in singular, like one work is $100. You fund 25% goes to this beautiful organization, Home Tree. If you wish to acquire a day, which is obviously more ambitious, Feral File have a wonderful app on your phone, and you can string them together to make one performance, which you can cast to like a TV in your home, or you can kind of like you can live with the works in different ways. So I mean, it is a sort of a way to distribute the work in a very radically different way than I would have historically.
I'm just curious now, with this project, you've kind of finished. Are you just watching it now? You've no hand or part now. It's all set up. It's all.
Oh yeah, no, it's handed over. I mean, the one thing I have done and will continue to do is I will continue to tell the story of Crystalline Work, because it is quite complicated. Benjamin and I and the wonderful team at Feral File, we will spend a year accompanying the work. We'll bring it to climate change conferences. We will bring it to different forms of let's say token conferences of different sorts. And I will, I'm beating the drum for this new space for public art, and also this idea of a little bit post-place, like a cultural energy that's not so geographic.
I love it. I love it. Again, it does tie into the whole concept of democratization in this space, or whether it's fun, and this is access to art. It's on your browser.
Yeah.
And one final question for you then, John. When people buy the collection, do they get the actual performance itself? Is that part of the purchase, so they can see their piece being made?
That's actually, let me demo that for you, because it's actually lovely, just as a last little thing.
Very powerful, I think. It's like watching an artist paint. It's your creation.
Absolutely, yeah. So basically, let me share again, 1 second. So there's actually really a lot. If you can try and communicate to your audience, there's really a lot embedded in here. Okay, So I'm going to do this. So here is a work, which is Crystalline Work, Arctic 10, which is number 10 is 1 to 10, 1 to 24 works in the day. Okay. So that's the first number. The next number is 1 ray. You can see in the middle there, it's a single ray work, basically. The next day, it's day 15 of a 365-day year. And the last is year 1 of the piece, basically. So that's the naming protocol there. That's how you work out where you are. So, so as you can see, I can look around here. Now, there's a couple of things just to tell you. I've already demonstrated top left-hand corner, goes full screen. You can go full screen on the work. Bottom right-hand corner, which I did not mention to you, switches on a generative audio element, which is a data-driven choir, which kind of, in a sense, it's like, what is it? It's a bit like a singing bowl, which unfolds across the year. So it's kind of meditative sound that accompanies the work across the year. I'll just bring it up. It's quite high in the summer, quite a high note. It drops into the winter and then comes back up. So this is one of the very early instances for me of this idea of the infinite play album, you know, this idea of the musical album that is post media. This is a data album, post media, performed in the browser, basically, which I'm getting a lot of interest in, I have to say, especially when it's tokenized. Musicians are marooned in places like Spotify when they can't make a living. They're very interested to try and make a living from tokenized WebGL, let's say, albums of this sort. But relevant to your question here, if I click here, bottom right-hand corner, remember we're designing all of this for your phone. Like the key interface for this artwork is your phone. That's where we want it to be performed as such. So if you click the bottom right-hand corner on your phone, or on your touch screen in particular, let's say your iPad, the robot will come out and will remake that pattern. So this is early in the performance. I think this is probably a red mirrored robot. On the Solstice, it's a pure mirrored robot. And then the Solstice, it moves out of the, you know, it moves into the, let's say, the visible prism you can see here, and then across the prism, across the year. So the robot will continue to perform this pattern. And then at the end, when you see the beautiful tree, it glides out and it begins to make the pattern again. So it'll continue to do that until you do this, click again. And the top right-hand corner does something. And I'm having a moment trying to remember. I will just click it and see what it does. Maybe it does something. I'll find out. So if you hit I here in the window, the piece exports a 4K JPEG of itself, like a 4K JPEG of its pattern. So you can print that locally. You have permission to print it locally. So you can use it to print a 1 meter by 1 meter print of your work. So you can do a physical print. And actually, kind of interestingly for your audience, if you hit M, it will print out the pattern as a 3D model. Like it will export the pattern as a 3D model. So if you hit M, you get a 3D model, which you can 3D print as jewelry or use in a virtual world or anything like that. So there's a lot in there. You know, if you get the work, there's a lot in there, basically.
So you're really a gamer come artist, or artist come gamer. There's a lot of layers.
Yeah. I mean, all the technology is from gaming.
I have many friends now who encourage their children to play games because it's such a huge market, you know, because before, you know, the whole idea was that gamers ended up being sad, lonely lads living in an attic above their parents or something like that. And now it's like, oh, go play more games.
Yeah, it's the world is definitely changing, but I think everything in moderation is always wise.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for explaining it, because it makes much more sense now. I had a bit of a grasp of it, but the robot thing, I said, where does the robot live in the virtual world? Oh my goodness.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people have that question.
No, amazing. Thank you so much for your time today. That's absolutely mind-blowing, and I wish you every success in your year with Crystalline.
Thank you. Okay, great stuff. Thank you, Jillian. Take care.